There is a palace at the foot of the Royal Mile in Edinburgh that is still, in the year of this recording, the official Scottish residence of the British monarch. And if you walk down the long descent from the Castle Rock, past the Tron Kirk and the Canongate toll booth, on a grey October morning, with the volcanic plug of Arthur's Seat rising green on your left, and the steel and glass curve of the Scottish Parliament on your right, you will reach the iron gates of Holyroodhouse and see something that should not exist on the edge of a modern capital city. The Palace of Holyroodhouse rises against the slopes of Holyrood Park in pale grey ashlar, with 2 square Renaissance towers, a central courtyard, and the ruined nave of an Augustinian abbey attached to its north range like a stone shadow. The Palace of Holyroodhouse covers 6 acres of formal precinct. It contains 289 rooms, the most complete suite of Stuart royal apartments surviving in the British Isles, the abbey ruins of David I's 1128 foundation, and the bedchamber where, on the evening of the 9th of March 1566, an Italian musician called David Rizzio was dragged from the side of his pregnant queen and stabbed 56 times in the antechamber while she watched. The bloodstain on the floor of that antechamber is still pointed out to visitors. Whether the stain is original to 1566 or has been periodically refreshed by successive royal collection housekeepers is one of those questions the official guide does not encourage you to ask. They walk the throne room, they photograph the ruined abbey nave, they pause in the long picture gallery beneath portraits of 110 Scottish kings, most of which are imaginary. They buy shortbread in the visitor centre, and almost none of them ask the question that the small antechamber on the second floor, with its dark wood panelling and its single visible bloodstain, seems to insist upon. Did Mary Queen of Scots watch? Not a fortress, not a country retreat, not a Tudor concession. The Palace of Holyroodhouse was, from its origins as the guest house of Holyrood Abbey in the 12th century, through its reign as the principal Scottish royal palace from the 1490s onwards, the political stage on which the late medieval Scottish crown lived its public life. It was where James IV was married to Margaret Tudor in 1503. It was where James V was crowned in 1513. It was where Mary Queen of Scots, returning from France in 1561, at the age of 18 as a Catholic widowed queen, took up residence in a Protestant capital. It was where her Italian secretary was murdered in front of her in March 1566. It was where Charles I was the last monarch crowned at the Scottish coronation in 1633. And it was where, in the long century after the union of the crowns in 1603, the Stuart monarchs increasingly did not live, leaving the Scottish royal residence to be repaired, rebuilt, abandoned, sacked, restored, and kept in slow decline by a succession of royal commissioners. Holyroodhouse is one of the most photographed royal palaces in the British Isles. It has been the official Scottish residence of every British monarch, from George IV to Charles III. It hosts, every June, the official garden party of the King in Scotland, where some 8,000 Scottish guests in summer dresses and morning coats receive a glass of champagne and a cucumber sandwich on the lawn. It is also one of the most discreetly violent buildings in Britain, because behind the Renaissance ashlar and the abbey ruins and the Stuart state apartments lies a history of concealment, of murders ordered, of murders executed in the Queen's own bedchamber, of an Italian musician knifed by armed men with the Queen's husband holding her arm, of a Catholic mass said in secret behind drawn curtains, and of a Scottish royal residence so soaked in 16th century blood that the official housekeeping staff still keep the antechamber pointed out as a tourist attraction. Holyroodhouse is where the Stuart dynasty came apart, in front of itself, in March 1566. If you find these deep investigations into Britain's great houses, palaces, and royal residences worth your time, please subscribe to this channel, leave a comment telling me which place we should explore next, and help these stories reach the audience they deserve. It begins with a stag and a king in the year 1128, according to the founding legend of Holyrood Abbey, as recorded in the chronicles of John of Fordun 200 years later. the Scottish king David I was hunting in the forest below Edinburgh Castle on the feast day of the Holy Cross. He was thrown from his horse by a great stag and was about to be gored when, between the points of the stag's antlers, he saw the shape of a Christian cross. The stag turned away. David founded an abbey on the site to commemorate his deliverance. He called it Holyrood, which is Old Scots for Holy Cross. He filled it with Augustinian canons. The abbey was the original royal foundation. By the late 13th century, it had become one of the wealthiest monastic houses in Scotland and the customary residence of Scottish kings travelling to Edinburgh, who stayed in the abbey guest house rather than at the cramped, draughty, militarily focused castle on the rock above the city. By the time of James IV's accession in 1488, the abbey guest house had been formally extended into a royal residence in its own right. Between 1501 and 1505, James IV commissioned a major rebuilding programme that produced the first proper royal palace at Holyroodhouse, a Renaissance-influenced four-square courtyard plan, with staterooms, a chapel, and the King's Lodging in the northwest tower. It was in this newly built palace, on the 8th of August 1503, that the 30-year-old James IV married the 13-year-old Margaret Tudor, sister of the future Henry VIII, in a marriage that would, in due course, deliver to her great-grandson James VI of Scotland the throne of England and unite the two kingdoms a century later. Holyrood was, from that wedding morning onwards, the political fulcrum of the Anglo-Scottish dynastic question. Every subsequent crisis in the Stuart line came through it. Most of those crises arrived violently. James IV was killed at Flodden in 1513. James V died at Falkland in 1542, 6 days after the birth of his daughter, on receiving the news of her sex and his own military disasters. The infant Mary inherited the throne at 6 days old, was sent to France in 1548 at the age of 5 to be raised as the future bride of the Dauphin, and married Francis II of France in 1558 at the age of 15. Francis died 18 months later. Mary was widowed at 19. She returned to Scotland on the 19th of August 1561, sailed up the Forth in a fog so thick that no one on the Edinburgh quayside could see her ship until it was within 20 yards of the harbour, and was rowed ashore at Leith with a small retinue of French servants, a Catholic chaplain, 3 Italian musicians, and a complete imported French wardrobe. She was met by an Edinburgh crowd that did not entirely know what to make of her. She was a Catholic queen, returning to a country whose Reformation had legally outlawed the Catholic Mass 18 months earlier. She was 18, 6 feet tall, French-trained, more comfortable in French than in Scots, the daughter of a French queen mother who had governed Scotland on her behalf for the previous 17 years. She was also, at that moment, the legal heir apparent to her cousin Elizabeth I of England, who had not yet at the age of 28 produced an heir of her own, and was widely expected not to. Mary moved into Holyroodhouse on the 20th of August 1561. She lived there for the next 6.5 years. The Holyroodhouse Mary inherited in 1561 was fundamentally the Renaissance palace James IV had built 60 years earlier, with 2 extensions added by her grandfather James V in the 1530s. The royal apartments were on the 2nd floor of the northwest tower. The Queen's bedchamber was small, perhaps 15 feet square, with a single window facing east toward Arthur's Seat. The bedchamber opened through a low wooden door into a smaller antechamber known as the supper room, where the Queen and her closest household took informal meals on evenings when she did not dine in state. The supper room measured approximately 12 feet by 10. It had room for 1 small table and 6 chairs. No more. It was approached from the public stair through a guarded outer chamber. This is the room. David Rizzio, in some sources Riccio, in some Riccio, was a small, dark, hump-backed Italian musician from Pancalieri in Piedmont, who had arrived in the Scottish royal household in 1561 in the train of the Sardinian ambassador and had stayed when the ambassador left. He was an excellent bass singer. He was a competent diplomatic correspondent in 3 languages. He was, by 1564, Mary's private secretary for French and papal affairs. He had access to her at all hours of the day. He was almost certainly her closest personal advisor by the autumn of 1565. He was widely, though not, on the available evidence, accurately believed to be her lover. Mary's marriage in July 1565 to her young cousin, Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, had begun deteriorating within 10 weeks of the wedding. Darnley was a 19-year-old aristocrat with charm, ambition, syphilis, and a chronic political weakness for whichever Scottish noble had spoken to him most recently. By the autumn of 1565, his marriage was in open political difficulty. Mary had already begun to exclude him from substantive Privy Council business. She was openly relying on Rizzio for diplomatic correspondence and on her bastard half-brother, James Stuart, Earl of Moray, for domestic political guidance. By Christmas 1565, Mary was visibly 6 months pregnant. The child she was carrying would, in due course, be the future James VI of Scotland and first of England. The child was, by every contemporary medical reckoning, Darnley's. Darnley was beginning to suspect that it was Rizzio's, the Protestant nobility, led by Patrick, Lord Ruthven, James Douglas, Earl of Morton, and Mary's own half-brother Moray, exploited Darnley's jealousy. What they wanted was not Rizzio. What they wanted was the legal recognition of Darnley as crown matrimonial of Scotland, the formal joint sovereignty that would allow them, through Darnley, to seize Mary's executive power. Rizzio's death was simply the wedge by which Darnley could be brought into the conspiracy. They explained to Darnley that Rizzio was the Queen's lover, that Rizzio had supplanted Darnley in her councils, and that the only way to recover his marriage and his political authority was to remove Rizzio physically from the palace. Darnley, who was 20 years old, vain, and politically suggestible, agreed. He signed a written bond on the 1st of March 1566. The conspirators signed it after him. The murder was scheduled for the evening of Saturday, the 9th of March 1566. What happened that evening is one of the most precisely documented private murders in early modern European history. We have 3 eyewitness accounts. We have Mary's own letter to her uncle, the Cardinal of Lorraine, written within 48 hours. We have the testimony of Lord Ruthven himself, who was one of the assassins and who wrote a self-justifying account on his deathbed 3 months later. We have Mary's confessor's account, which was smuggled to Rome. At about 7 o'clock in the evening, Mary was at supper in the supper room of her private apartments at Holyroodhouse. She was attended by the Countess of Argyll, by an equerry called Arthur Erskine, by her chief servant Bastion Pages, and by David Rizzio, who was sitting opposite her at the small table. The room was lit by candles. Mary was 6.5 months pregnant. Lord Darnley entered the room from the privy stair, the small spiral staircase that connected his apartments on the floor below directly to his wife's bedchamber. He sat down beside Mary. He was unarmed. He kissed her. She greeted him pleasantly. 3 minutes later, Patrick Ruthven entered the same privy stair behind Darnley. He was carrying a sword. He was in armour. Behind him, on the stair, were 5 other Scottish nobles: George Douglas, Andrew Kerr of Faldonside, Patrick Ballantyne, Henry Yare, and an unnamed 6th figure, all armed. They filled the antechamber. Ruthven told Mary to send Rizzio out of the room. He told her that Rizzio was a traitor. Rizzio, according to Mary's own account, took refuge behind her chair and gripped the folds of her dress. Kerr drew a pistol and pointed it at Mary's pregnant abdomen. Andrew Faldonside, according to Ruthven's later testimony, would have shot the Queen dead, but that the cocked weapon was struck up by Lord Darnley. George Douglas drew a dagger and stabbed Rizzio over Mary's shoulder in the small of his back, while Mary sat between him and the killer. Rizzio was dragged out of the supper room into the next chamber. The murder party fell on him. He was stabbed, by every contemporary count, between 53 and 56 times, with a combination of swords and daggers, in the lobby outside the supper room. He died screaming. The body was thrown down the public staircase to the entrance hall. He was buried 2 days later in a plain grave in the abbey churchyard. Within 12 months, on Mary's orders, his body was disinterred and reburied with greater honour in the royal tomb of the Scottish kings in the abbey chapel. The bloodstain in the antechamber, where Rizzio was killed, has been pointed out to visitors continuously since the late 17th century. The contemporary parts of the floor were replaced in the 19th century. The current stain is, in the carefully neutral phrasing of the Royal Collection Trust, a tradition rather than a forensic certainty. Mary Stuart's reign survived the night by less than 3 months. She gave birth to James VI on the 19th of June 1566 at Edinburgh Castle. Within 9 months, Darnley himself was murdered by an unrelated conspiracy in a bed at Kirkhoe Field in Edinburgh on the 10th of February 1567. Mary married James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, the chief suspect in Darnley's death, on the 15th of May 1567. 3 months later, she was deposed by the Scottish Protestant lords on the 24th of July 1567. She fled to England in May 1568. She was held in English custody for 19 years. She was beheaded at Fotheringhay on the 8th of February 1587. Holyroodhouse continued through all of this as the principal Scottish royal palace. Mary's son James VI was crowned at Stirling, but he held court at Holyroodhouse throughout his Scottish reign. After his accession to the English throne in 1603 and the union of the crowns, the Stuart monarchs increasingly resided in London. Holyroodhouse was kept as a Scottish residence, but not lived in by the king. Charles I visited briefly in 1633 for his Scottish coronation. In 1650, it was occupied by Cromwell's troops, who used the abbey nave as a stable and accidentally set fire to the palace. Much of the medieval interior was destroyed. After the restoration, Charles II commissioned the architect Sir William Bruce to design a new symmetrical palace facade, building on the surviving northwest tower. The current Holyroodhouse is substantially Bruce's 1671 to 1679 reconstruction, with the surviving Mary Tower preserved at the northwest corner. Bonnie Prince Charlie occupied the palace briefly in September 1745 during the Jacobite Rising. He held a ball in the picture gallery on the 17th of September. He was at Holyroodhouse for 6 weeks. Queen Victoria began the modern royal use of Holyroodhouse in 1850, staying there each summer on her way north to Balmoral. Edward VII used it for state functions. George V held the first formal Holyrood Garden Party in July 1911. Elizabeth II held the Holyrood Garden Party every summer from 1953 to 2022. King Charles III holds it now. The Stuart antechamber, where Rizzio died, remains preserved on the second floor of the northwest tower, 2 doors away from the state bedchamber that Charles II built for himself. But the palace that has stood at the foot of the Royal Mile for 900 years was not built or kept by the kings, whose initials are carved over its gates. Their presence at Holyroodhouse is documented, recorded in ink on paper, in the royal household accounts of Scotland, in the surviving records of the Augustinian Abbey, and in the parish records of the Canongate Kirk, held at the National Records of Scotland in Edinburgh. Their stories are not. There was an Italian musician's servant called Angelo, who is named in the 1565 royal household accounts as receiving 4 shillings a week, and who was almost certainly the man who carried Rizzio's body from the lobby down the stair to the entrance hall on the night of the 9th of March 1566. He continued in royal service through the Regency. He died in 1582, aged 51, of fever at a lodging on the Canongate. He has no known burial. There was a chambermaid called Margaret Cockburn, who served Mary Queen of Scots between 1561 and 1567, who is recorded in the 1565 wage book as receiving 20 merks a year and a livery of black wool, and whose name appears as a witness on the 1567 Privy Council declaration that confirmed Mary had voluntarily abdicated. She had not. The witness signature was procured under duress at Loch Leven Castle. We do not know whether she objected. There was an abbey gardener called William Stark who tended the formal gardens at Holyroodhouse for 34 years between 1622 and 1656, who who is named in the 1633 visit accounts as receiving £5 Scots for the dressing of the parterre on the King's coming, and who survived the 1650 Cromwellian fire that destroyed most of the palace. He retired in 1656. He died in 1668. His son William also worked the Holyrood Gardens. They appear in the records as footnotes, a name beside a sum, a wage book entry, a witness signature, and then they vanish into the silence that swallows everyone in a great palace who is not a member of the family that lives in it. We do not know their faces. We do not know how they viewed the events they served. We know only that they were there, that the palace they served is still standing, and that their names survived, some of them because the Scottish royal household accounts and the Canongate parish registers were kept, and nobody threw them away. The Stuarts were anointed in the abbey. Other men and women cleaned the floors after the bloodstain dried. The palace absorbed both. Stand at the gates of Holyroodhouse on a November afternoon. Stand at the iron gates of Holyroodhouse on a November afternoon with the volcanic mass of Arthur's Seat green behind the abbey ruins and the wind coming up the Royal Mile from Edinburgh Castle. And you see what every visitor has seen for 350 years, a Renaissance Scottish royal palace with the medieval abbey nave roofless beside it, set against a city of 1 million people. But look closer and the picture complicates. The west range of the palace is Sir William Bruce's 1671 reconstruction. The Mary Tower on the northwest is the surviving 1530s structure. The abbey nave is the 1128 foundation, ruined since the Cromwellian fire. The state apartments inside Bruce's wings are 17th century. The royal vault beneath the abbey, which holds the bones of 3 Scottish kings, is closed to the public. The bloodstain in the antechamber, where Rizzio died, was, depending on which royal collection housekeeper you ask, last refreshed somewhere between 1822 and 1857. Holyroodhouse is not one palace. It is the record, in stone and varnish and Stuart memory, of 900 years of Scottish royalty, deciding what to remember and what to gloss. David I wanted an abbey commemoration of the Holy Cross. He got one. James IV wanted a Renaissance royal palace. He got one. Mary Queen of Scots wanted a Catholic chapel, and a French household, and an Italian secretary. She got all 3, and her Italian secretary was knifed in front of her on a March evening. Charles II wanted a symmetrical restoration palace built over the burnt medieval structure. Sir William Bruce gave him one. Queen Victoria wanted a Scottish residence with a railway station drive from London. She got one. King Charles III now wants the same. The palace gave them all what they asked of it, in the careful, expensive, neutral manner of a royal building accustomed to absorbing dynastic upheaval and the occasional knife in the antechamber. The palace always gives. That is its genius, and that is its cost, because what Holyroodhouse has also always preserved, in its abbey wage books and its garden accounts and its 16th century chambermaid signatures, is the names of the Angelus and the Margaret Cockburns and the William Starks, without whom no royal supper could have been served and no body carried down the privy stair. The Stuarts are buried in the abbey vault. Margaret Cockburn is in an unmarked grave at Canongate Kirk. Holyroodhouse asks the same question that all great houses ask, but with a particularly Scottish sharpness that no other British royal palace quite matches. Who does a palace belong to? The David I, who saw a cross between a stag's antlers in 1128, the James IV, who built it in 1503, the 18-year-old French-raised Catholic queen who came home in 1561 and watched her secretary stabbed 5 months pregnant, the William Bruce, who rebuilt the Western Range in 1671, the 170,000 visitors a year who pay to see the antechamber or the volcanic plug behind it, Arthur's Seat, which was here before any king of Alba had a stone keep and will be there long after the last guard has gone home. Holyroodhouse does not answer. The palace never answers. It simply stands, pale grey stone with abbey ruins beside it, at the foot of the Royal Mile, and lets you decide. And on the floor of the antechamber, on the second floor of the northwest tower, behind a discreet rope barrier, there is a dark stain on the wooden boards that the official guide describes as the place where David Rizzio was killed on the 9th of March 1566. Whether the stain is original to that night or has been periodically refreshed by the Royal Collection housekeeping staff over 460 years, the official guide does not say. The stain is still there. He is still in there. He always will be. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you see a building differently, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me which palace, estate, or hidden history we should investigate next. There are hundreds of these stories waiting to be told, and every one of them is hiding something beneath the surface.